and welcome to episode 10 of the Clearly Cloud podcast with Sean Spicer and Conrad Agramont. Conrad, you know what? No. It's October. You know what this month is?
The time to go Halloween, and we can't do Halloween because it's COVID. Or was there another topic you're looking for? This year, Halloween fell on a weekend. Oh, man.
Me and Ghetto Boys were trick-or-treating. No, it's Cybersecurity Month.
Oh, I probably would have known that, but it probably went in my spam filter.
Well, it's just the most important month of the year where we talk more about cybersecurity and users ignore it anyway.
It's true. I know, the fun one was where Microsoft came out and redid a bunch of the names. So now it's like Microsoft Defender everywhere. So maybe they kind of knew like, hey, this is Cybersecurity Month, so let's do it now.
Let's just confuse everybody. All the nomenclatures. But today, we finally fulfill the prophecy of our theme song. We had Chris from the FBI talking about AI, and today we've got Ian Bernstein from Misty Robotics talking about cloud robotics. So now we've done it. Robots and AI. Now we can be over it. We've met the requirements of the theme song, and we can talk about whatever we want.
So those people that started with episode 1 and then listened to all of the music and said, this is crazy. They're never going to talk about robots and AI. It is complete.
We have done it. And it was not easy. But real quick, to go back to Cybersecurity Month, let's just give a tip to people that are out there listening, because I know that a lot of our listeners are not in the tech industry per se. What would your one tip to somebody for cybersecurity be? If everybody in the world would listen to Conrad's booming voice from the heavens.
And the only thing I could talk about would be the one tip of cybersecurity.
One tip of cybersecurity. I know what mine would be.
What?
People of Earth, use MFA.
That's it. Use
That's MFA. My one commandment. Thou shalt use MFA.
I guess mine would be whatever you're doing for security, it's not enough.
That is true. True.
Whatever you're doing for security, no matter how much you're doing it, how great it is not enough. And I think that the reason is there's always blind spots when it comes to security. And it's one of those places where anytime you feel like, okay, I've done everything. I've set it up. I can configure it. I have a person watching it. Time to go on vacation. I don't need to do anything else. You have failed.
Yep. 0 day.
It is a constant, it's a journey that never ends. So don't give it a finish line. Just give it a set of stakes, not like yummy steaks to eat, but like stakes in the ground, like little milestones that you're hitting constantly.
It sounded like a poem. Let's talk about the news.
5, 4, 3, 2, bringing you some news.
Conrad, what happened with AD? Azure Active Directory went down this week for 5 hours. And I had friends hitting me up on Facebook and Messenger going, what's Microsoft doing, man? Quit messing with me.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was when it started to happen, I was, because from time to time I'll make some changes to our policies to improve it. Because like I said, security is a journey. You don't just set and forget it, which is every time I hear set and forget, I just can't help but think about the infomercials. Anyway, I was like, oh my goodness, is something happening? So I open up my browser too. I can't log in. I was like, oh goodness. Okay, maybe it's just commercial. So I log on to portal.azure.us. That's not working. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. The commercial and the government one's not working. So okay, let me go. Maybe it's something here on the computer. Maybe it's a device policy. So I get my phone out, put it on the cell phone internet. So it wouldn't do the company Wi-Fi. I go to the same things again, same error. Then you go to Twitter and it says, oh, it is in fact down. So first, bit of a sigh of relief that I was not the one that jacked it up. So that was Yeah. And I got to say, for all IT people out there, I'm sure it went through the same progression that I did. And they're like, boss, it isn't me. Okay.
Yes. Oh,
I did
goodness.
not do it. My network didn't do it. All the people calling in who are saying that it's my name, it wasn't me. So
my goodness. Yeah, not news related, but the funniest instance of that I ever saw. I was sitting at the local pub. I've got my laptop out. I'm working on some blog stuff. It's happy hour, just relaxing a little bit after a long day of tech talks. And they have a guy in there who's setting up a new POS system behind the bar. And as soon as he turns on the computer, goes out. And you can hear like the compressor fan slowing down, that sound of a power outage. Outside, cars start honking. All the power has gone down for the entire block. And I look over at him and I go, what the hell did you do? And he said, that wasn't me. And I'm like, that's what every IT guy says.
It's so true. I mean, it's so many fun stories about that same thing. But same thing here, right? Like it all went down.
Yep.
So, there's an article coming back, and if you look at what the Twitter feed from Microsoft, essentially saying, that there was that first they were looking into the issue, and then it was, okay, we see that it was an update made, so now we're rolling it back. And it was, okay, we rolled it back, but services still aren't there. We're rerouting things.
Oh my goodness, was it Patch Tuesday?
And it was like, no, what? and then there was, so I think it took about 5 hours for everything to come back, but I think probably it was about 2 hours, and then some services started to go up, up and down, and then they were up. Now the one thing was, this was for new logins, new sessions. So if you were already logged in, had a valid session, you were not affected. So some people were like, oh, I'm still able to email. I'm out because I'm in Teams and I can do it. But if you went to open up a new browser to go to Office 365, or if you went to portal, whatever, those things will work authentication. So here's the thing, as much redundancy as Microsoft puts in everywhere, which they talk about quite a bit, things can still happen, because at the end of the day, there's still just a bunch of people writing pieces of code and delivering things. People make mistakes. And Microsoft's not the only one. Google recently went through this, and I bet somewhere in their IT shop, they went down. So there's that question. I talked to the company like, well, what do we tell people if they say, well, why should I go to the cloud with Azure Active Directory? Well, first thing, everybody has outages at some point. Yep. Nobody likes it. It's just a way of the world. Every single place has outages. The second biggest thing is when that outage is happening, nobody likes it. You don't like it. I don't like it. But if I had an outage on my end that I controlled, I still wouldn't like it. So that wouldn't change. But I would have to deal with it. I would have to get my programmer that's in. I have to find my IT guy who's out in some vacation someplace and getting calls from people like, I thought you did this, you're managing it, but I didn't have to handle that stress.
If you have an outage of that size, I can tell you exactly where your IT guy is. He's just getting off the ground in the airplane heading on vacation. That's when it happens.
It's true. But in this case, we were just upset and inconvenienced. But I didn't have to deal with the stress of it. So anyway, I'm sure they'll come out with more news on it later. But yeah,
and that brings me around to another thing that I read in Tech Republic is that, so of course with COVID-19, the most impacted sector for workers just taking on stress was healthcare, and heart out to everybody working on the front line there. But the second most affected sector was tech. And you think about this, tech workers in the middle of all of this tumultuous change we've had since March, they say that tech industry employees had the most negative changes of any industry, with an 11% increase in job stress, 14% increase in disordered sleep, 23% increase in burnout, and a 40% drop in motivation. And it's because not only did they have to overnight get everybody able to work from home, suddenly everybody working from home is calling them. And you think it's hard when you've got a router problem in the office? When Betty from HR is working on her AT&T DSL and her router doesn't work. Like,
well, yeah, and then they can't even log into Office 365 now too. Yeah. What is the world happening? What is this? A pandemic? Oh wait,
I know.
It is.
It's the end of the world as we know it. Uh-oh, we stop. Exactly. We're going to get a copyright claim.
Oh, goodness, great. Well, I mean, it was less than 5 seconds, so I think we're okay. Yeah, that's, we're in a pandemic. But how do you fix that, right? I mean, part of this is a technology thing. Like, did you hear Microsoft is going to be rolling out some features into, I think, Teams or something like that, where you can have this scheduled times which matches your commute? Right, because they're like, people used to complain about their commutes. Oh, I have to drive into the office and sit in traffic. Turns out during that time was a time of privacy. You could sit there, listen to music, listen to the radio, have your cup of coffee, honk and yell at people, because that's a way of getting rid of stress too.
You can listen to the Clearly Cloud podcast.
Yeah, they don't even have that opportunity. So that was kind of interesting of like, what in our daily lives that we find to be frustrating that now that it's not here, we miss it. And turns out it was actually beneficial.
I do not miss 1.5-hour commutes. Well,
when I lived in Virginia, when I was, I had an office up in DC. It was like an hour commute, and in traffic that was barely moving. Yeah, that part. People in the DMV, I don't miss that at all. It's fun. My commute now when I go in is about 20 minutes, and it's just nice commute driving because it's Southern California, and plus it's pandemic, not many people on the road. Anyway, things that we miss in that. Yep. So yeah, I mean, remote work is tough. Yeah, it is, and I'm happy to be in marketing where I just have to tell the stories and I don't have to deal with Betty from HR's router. Hey, but speaking of archaic technology, Microsoft has finally pulled the plug on Internet Explorer, or Internet Exploder, as we used to call it. Oh, again? Well, yeah, they tried the first time. Yeah, they tried the first time, and it didn't go so well. Yeah, but they're just not going to update it anymore. Well, the first attempt to get rid of IE was Edge. Right. And that didn't go so well. But Edge, the Edge now that's based on Chromium, much better. Yeah, and I'm not even going to try to keep up with the names anymore. Actually, I kind of like the new Edge. Like, it'll be a while. It took me a long time to move from Netscape to Firefox to Chrome. I like things to get a little bit mature and fast before I switch over to them. I made this prediction years ago, and I said at some point, because everybody's loving Chrome, they're like Chrome is fast and it's awesome and way better than IE. IE is bloated and slow and takes too much memory. And I said, mark my words. In some time in the next 5 some years, Chrome will go down. Like, what? It's not going to go down. I said, yes, it will. For one reason, well, I guess it's a grouping of reasons that all browsers go through. When they first start off, they're light and nimble because they only do a few things. Right. And then as people start to use them, they go, hey, we want to use this in our enterprise. Can you do corporal space authentication? Hey, when you do this, can we do group policy management so that some people can't do this? Hey, when you do this, can you handle these types of things? Hey, we want to extend it, put add-ons. And they keep saying yes and yes and yes. And they just keep going with it. And then they go, oh, my goodness, every time you open a new tab, it takes up a bunch of memory. People can't do it. It's a memory hog. It's doing this. Like, oh, my God, we're just like IE used to be. Yeah. And I mean, that's any technology. Yes. Operating systems do it. And operating systems, even on your home computer, do it. I mean, you remember reinstalling Windows every year just because it'd be so bloated with updates and ancillary software that you downloaded to join some web meeting, which needed a codec. I'm curious to see where Windows 10 is going to be in 5 more years because it's 5 years old now. I was going to say, hey, man, watch what you're saying. You're talking about my mother's computer. Yeah, it's just sits there and grows, and it's still running on some like Dell Optiplex from many years ago. It's got it's probably like 50 pounds of weight. Yeah, what's been interesting is that everybody's been running not Windows 10. They've been running Windows 10.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. Oh, as they like to call it. 1709 or 1903, 203. So you really are getting refreshes of the OS. They just did a really good job with Windows 10, kind of having that architecture to slowly slip things in, move it around, having updates. I am the driver models. Wood. I know where's the wood around here, but they've really done a really good job around that. The insider programs, getting feedback, and that's what allowed them to keep kind of going through that. And because they were losing money every time they would have a new OS come out. People would rip it, deploy it. I think it was something like 30 or 40% of those.
They'd have to pay the Rolling Stones or Weezer to do a new song for it.
Yeah. Well, and I think they found that it's probably more painful to roll out new OSs that way. And even though they still made money, but now they're getting your OS. You know, they're making their money not just by the OS. You know, you're already there. It continues to go, but it's because you're buying, you know, Office 365, and people are buying Office 365 Home. And I don't know, it's interesting how they've changed the whole model around it and have their updates. So kudos.
Yeah, I'm an Office 365 subscriber personally, but I remember, I think it was Office 99 or 98. I bought and I used that for 10 years. And I don't have a problem paying the subscription. But you know what? I think just like IE, the topic's dead. Let's move on to guests.
You said that topic would only take 2 minutes. You were wrong.
I didn't expect you to get into the entire history of bloat.
See, that just tells you don't know everything about me. You don't know me. You don't know me. All right. What's the next topic?
Let's get to the guest. I want to hear about robots.
4, 3, 2, 1, having some fun with guests.
And today we have Ian Bernstein of Misty Robotics. How are you today, Ian?
I'm great here in a beautiful day in Colorado.
Wonderful. Now, do you guys have any effect from fires out there?
Yeah, it's been really bad actually. Probably 2 months now. Probably similar to California and other areas. But yeah, it's been. I'm a huge outdoor person, and it's been tough to go outside. Just breathing that air, you get headaches and stuff a lot of days. So
yeah, air quality has been a frequent conversation with my friends when we talk on the phone. It's been crazy all over the western side of the U.S., and I knew Colorado was pretty woody. So, Ian, you are the founder of both Sphero and Misty Robotics. Can you tell us a little bit about what those are?
Yeah, so, my background is in hardware, mostly robotics. I got into robots when I was 12, sort of late 2009. I was playing with my iPhone, original iPhone, and realized, why can't this thing control physical devices, maybe robots? So I started a company called Sphero. The product is actually the first product was a robot ball, about the size of a tennis ball that you can control from your phone, play games, you can learn. It was programmable. These days, that company, now 10 years later, it's mostly in the education space. So tens of thousands of schools worldwide are using that product to teach everything from art to physics to programming, all kinds of stuff. About 4 years ago, within Sphero, we started thinking about more advanced robots, like robots that aren't just for learning and for entertainment, but that can actually start to do real stuff for us. So think in the future, version 40 of our robot, Rosie from the Jetsons, the robot, the robot that becomes part of your family as a character, but it can also, cook and clean and do stuff like that. So thinking about how we sort of start that path in technology, and we decided to release a platform robot. So a robot that developers and companies can build off of that don't have the expertise to build the robot themselves, but they can use our programming languages and software development kits to build applications for this robot. And that's Misti. So Misti is a 14-inch tall robot with sensors that allow her to have voice interaction and map and navigate your home. She has a face, and companies are using that now for all kinds of different things, again, from education to elder care, safety, security, receptionist. And now with COVID, we've built out a solution for it for health and temperature screening. So those are kind of high level of the two companies that I started.
So you said you got into robots at 12. So I bet as a kid, you were the kind of person that liked taking things apart.
Yeah. So, I mean, literally as far back as I can remember, I was probably 3 or 4 years old. I remember I had this little cardboard box of just parts that I had taken apart, broken cameras and cassette players and, things that were broken. I was trying to fix them. Of course, I was, 3 years old or something. I couldn't actually fix it, but I was always just curious of how things worked and very hands-on.
So what was the coolest thing you think you ever took apart?
Ooh. Oh man. I mean, I can't think of like one thing. I mean, probably some things are probably kind of dangerous, like different
Televisions.
TVs, right? I mean, you have a lot of high voltage stuff in there, but never shocked myself too bad.
Yeah, I took everything apart as a kid. And one day I took apart his shortwave radio, and he takes me out in the garage and he shows me this old TV and he goes, "Never take this apart. Let me show you why." And he takes it apart and he bridges that capacitor inside. This thing hasn't been plugged in weeks. He's like, "You've got to be really careful. Sometimes even if it's not plugged in, it'll rock your socks."
Yep.
So what was the first robot you built?
So my very first robot, so I actually homeschooled when I was a kid, and my dad is a musician, and he worked out this trade with this guy who taught electronics, and he would teach this guy guitar. I was learning about the basics, resistors and capacitors and, voltage and current and things like that. And about 3 months into this, he shows me a flyer for a robotics competition in New Mexico, a couple hours from where I grew up. And I just thought it was a competition. We showed up, we walked in the door, and they had a workshop to build robots. And it was this robotics that was very, it's all around sort of biologically inspired robots and using recycled materials. So they did have like piles of cassette players and stuff. And I ended up joining in this workshop, and I built my first robot. Was a little solar powered sort of car that was using half of a cassette player cut in half, and the motor and then some extra electronics, the solar panel. And then the next one was a version that could actually follow the sun, move towards the sun and follow light.
Oh, fun. So the Sphero, this robotic ball, and I've had the benefit of getting to play with a couple of them. They're really, really fun. But when they first came out, the idea of a ball that you could control, my first thought was, let's torment the dog. How did that idea come into conception? That had to be an engineering challenge.
Oh, it was a huge engineering challenge. So a couple different things. Like the very first idea for Sphero wasn't actually, the company was originally called Orbotics. And actually, the very first name was called Gearbox. So we went through several iterations of the company name, but it was more just controlling, like we were thinking like controlling your TV from your phone, things like that, or starting your car, opening your front door. And it was really like, it was one night, 3 a.m, my co-founder and I were sitting around the table. We had a whiteboard. We were just listing off all the things that we can control with the smartphone, because nobody was doing that back in early 2000, end of 2009, beginning of 2010. So really we could have done anything. It wasn't a crowded space like it is now, but I was like, we just need, all these crazy ideas. I was like, we need something simple, like something like I could just pull out of my pocket, throw it on the table, and it does something cool. And my co-founder was like, what about a marble? And then I thought back to this robot that I built when I was probably 14. That was kind of like a solar powered car, but it was a solar powered ball. And I was like, well, what about a robot ball? So we ended up making one. Like we prototyped it a couple weeks later, and it was super, super crude. It didn't work. And then, it took raising money and hiring a team to get it, to actually the first version of Sphero. But it was kind of a crazy idea. We liked it because we wanted it to be programmable, and it was kind of this blank slate where if people made apps, it could be a ball, it could be something else. It was very strong. It was kind of a simple shape. So we ended up being the robot ball company for a while.
Yeah, and there became thousands and thousands of projects that you could look up online in order to play with the Sphero. But I like that you talked about that you were looking for things you could control with the phone. And the idea of the Internet of Things has been around for a long time, and it had been around prior to the iPhone. But this was really, now we've got this centralized controller. And Misti is definitely an IoT device. Am I right in that?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it kind of depends on how you define IoT, but I would say, yeah. in a lot of cases. And in a lot of cases, it does kind of follow the same methodology as Sphero as well, because we do use 2 cell phone processors in Misti. So it's
you guys are using the Snapdragon, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So Misti is, in IoT terms, an edge device, and it's able to operate offline, but it can tie in directly to Azure, AWS, or Watson, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
have you seen any really striking uses of this and how people are making Misti a cloud-enabled robot?
Yeah, I mean, people are doing everything from, just projects over COVID. We saw one customer that made a face mask detection for the robot to be used maybe like in an entrance to a business or whatever, that can say, hey, can you put on your mask before you come in?
Oh, I love it.
So that's using more of a cloud-based, computer vision algorithm. We do a lot of stuff, customers and us. We most of the natural language processing that we do use a cloud service like Microsoft's Azure or Google services or Amazon services. The text to speech for dynamic voice. We do offer that on the edge, but sometimes the voices that you can get off the cloud sound a lot better. We pull weather data, we pull, for our temperature screening, for instance, like the robot greets you as you come in. So she'll say things like, hi, or welcome to whatever the business name is, but she can also say, hey, like, I hope you're staying dry out there, if she knows that the weather is rainy. So we can do a lot of tricks when we pull cloud data in.
It'd be interesting to see how you can also, add, maybe it already does, we can add to where, so it detects that you're speaking in a particular type of language and translate that, please put on your mask. Oh, wait a minute, you speak Farsi or something else, and they could still respond accordingly.
Absolutely. And just the amount of context that you can get. I mean, definitely we can run, if you're into machine learning or artificial intelligence, one of the libraries sort of systems that people use is TensorFlow, which we can run on the robot. Mm-hmm. And you can only do so much, right, on the edge. But when you take advantage of like Microsoft's computer vision algorithms, you can really give a lot of context to the robot. So if the robot's driving in around an environment, you can do, maybe every 10 seconds you send an image up to the cloud, or every 30 seconds you send an image up, do an analysis on that, and you might see a TV and a couch. So you can start to infer that might be maybe a living room or a waiting room if it's a business. Or if you see a refrigerator and a stove, you probably know it's a kitchen, or a bed, it's a bedroom. So you can start, and even things like sentiment analysis that I know IBM has put a lot of work into. There's a lot of APIs there. Nobody's done this yet, but I think there's a lot of cool uses for, especially relevant over COVID, for doing, mental health. Like the robot might be able to ask you certain questions, and based off of your answers, doing sentiment analysis on those things to detect things like depression, that can help people. But yeah, when you take advantage of all these APIs that are out there, and it's really easy to just send the data from the robot, to a cloud service and do this processing, to build some pretty sophisticated applications for the robot.
I've noticed that you're eating a tub of ice cream and watching Bridget Jones. Are you not feeling so well? Did you have a breakup? Yes, I did.
That's where Rosie the robot comes in.
Yep.
Yes. I have now ordered another tub of ice cream from Amazon. It'll be here in an hour. It's like, I love you.
Yeah. And so in our office, we had a setup where when people would come into the office, they would interface with a little tablet. It would take their picture, notify whoever their meeting was with, and they'd get a little printout. And a couple of us in the office were looking at Misti and saying, hey, we could tie this in with Active Directory, map out our office, and have Misti actually guide the person to the meeting room where they're supposed to be. And we thought that was an interesting use case. But after COVID happened, I got an email talking about this temperature screening assistant that you guys built. And you did it it seemed like it was just a few weeks after we left the office. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, unfortunately, a lot of our customers for Misti were in the elder care space, we're in the education space.
Very high impact. Working
on office. Yeah, exactly. Like everything just shut down. Like we had several of our customers were in field trials with different applications, like in-home elder care. Of course, everything shut down. So when that happened, we're like, okay, well, we're not going to. At the time, we were spending all of our time supporting our customers. We can't just sit around. Like, well, maybe we could build our own application. So we thought of a bunch of things, but COVID, seeing this temperature health screening solution, assistant solution, felt like the best thing at the time, and still does. And so we decided to build it. So we did a ton of engineering research on how you can take accurate temperature. We looked at how those little temperature guns that you see everywhere work, realized that those are actually very inaccurate, like probably half the time because they're not used correctly. The other half of the time because just the sensors are terrible. Decided to go with a thermal camera solution to detect your temperature based on the temperature of your tear ducts, which is probably the best place on your face to read an accurate temperature.
I'm glad my mom didn't know that.
And so we went out like almost immediately. We started prototyping a skill. We showed up at some local businesses that were still open in Boulder, with our masks on and tried it. So Misti will greet a person when they walk in. She sort of guides them through the experience. She'll everything's sort of customizable. So she'll ask screening questions like, have you been around somebody with COVID in the last 14 days? Have you exhibited any symptoms? The person can respond yes or no to those questions. And then she takes their temperature where the thermal camera looks at their face. She says like, please remove your hat or glasses if you have one on, and takes their temperature. And we use it's called the temperature reference device. So there's on a stand next to you while you're going through this, there's basically a reference. It's a little black box that is at a set temperature that we know. So we're basically calibrating the system every time somebody goes through. So we get very accurate temperatures. And the advantage of Misti is the personality. So it's not just this, it's already kind of people are already annoyed that they have to wear a mask and get their temperature checked and everything, but Misti can be friendly. And we notice almost everybody just walks away smiling from the experience. And we're starting to add in other things to it. Like she can, tell you some random fact or like a joke or whatever, just something fun to like, make it a good experience versus, something negative.
That's great. And so I love the idea of the Misti Solution Hub, which the idea of a cloud marketplace. So Azure's got it, Salesforce has it. I mean, any big platform, and that's Misti as a platform, has this place where you can extend upon the platform with community contributions. And I noticed a lot of that was around in-home and elder care. How are some of those solutions leveraging the cloud? Are they tying in with EHR systems, communicating back with hospitals, things like that?
A little bit. So some of them are working with more cloud-based, say like chatbots, so you can have sort of deeper conversations with the robot based on sort of those cloud services. Other ones, some of them like school-oriented customers that are in the Solution Hub. I mean, it's really tricky in some of those cases to use the cloud. So they have to do a lot more stuff on the edge just for, regulations around sending data from kids,
right?
Around COPA and stuff like that. So some of them are actually doing most of the stuff on the actual robot versus trying to send stuff up to the cloud. So it's kind of a mix of like which ones are using cloud services versus, doing stuff on the edge.
Conrad's going to hit me because every time we have an episode, somehow it turns into policy.
Yeah, I was pretty much thinking that's the next thing because, with we have had a lot of discussions with other guys around, compliance and privacy, and especially, dealing with kids, or even not with kids. Like you have here, you're doing, you're checking people's temperature, but somebody could program it to take a picture of who they are and store it. And maybe nothing for anything nefarious. Maybe it is, but how to, like when Sean was saying, when people come in, they hit the tablet, they also sign like, yes, it's okay to take my picture. Yes, I understand I'm going to be here and I can sign an NDA. When taking the temperature. Now for you, it's like, well, we have this SDK, people can do what they want. But at some point, do people look at it and say, well, what, how do you ensure that people aren't using it in that bad way? And, I'm sure it'll be like, oh, I guess we'll have to like certify some apps and services, and some are just, good luck, as it gets more popular and it collects more data and provides more information. Because, be interesting to know that Sean came into the office 3 different times of day, different heat temperatures, what he's wearing, and you can infer a lot through some interesting AI models with the data on the back end that were serviced through this device.
Yep. Yeah, totally. And it's definitely a balance. Like overall with the robot, we made a conscious decision early on in the development to make sure to let it be more open versus more sandboxed, because we weren't exactly sure what type of applications would come out, and we didn't want to sort of prematurely limit people. So we knew it would be less secure. We knew it would be less private. But we wanted to give people the option to just be completely creative and open with what they created. And then once we started to see how people wanted to use Misti, we knew there was a path to being able to lock things down and sandbox things later on to make sure it was private and secure for those types of applications. So we have had to do some stuff for like our temperature screening solution to make sure that we're not, violating any policies or any regulations. But it is a pretty open platform at this point for the most part, just to allow people to be creative. And that was conscious on our part.
Yeah, there was, like, I remember there was a guest, a couple, on one of the episodes, and we actually talked about this, where sometimes the regulations and the rules aren't so clear, and it either keeps people in the box from not doing anything, and because they're not sure, like, well, what if I do this, and then there's a rule or something finds out, and like, oh my goodness, I was actually allowing something bad. And others who are just saying, well, there's no real rule or clarity, so caution to the wind. I'm just gonna go for it, and then I'll handle it later on. And this is kind of that same conundrum, right? It's like, well, there is no clarity on how you can use it. There's some of it, but how do you provide, guidance around security and compliance before people don't go too far? They're like, oh, well, thanks for telling me now. I've already crafted my whole app on this. Like, what too late until there's a law or something. And that's kind of a tricky thing.
Yeah, that was episode 8 with Ed Britton. He was is the senior counsel for AI and privacy at Microsoft.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
What he was talking about too was that adding the regulations empowers businesses that if they have certainty in what they can do, then the larger businesses are willing to take the risk. But meanwhile, when it's totally open and there's no regulation, it leaves everything open for disruption. Like right now in California, we're fighting over whether Uber and Lyft and everybody, if the gig economy can still exist, or are they exploiting just loopholes in labor law? So I think things do have to kind of grow as the solutions. I think that's a very intelligent approach, Ian, to leave it open and then allow people to stack the security they need on top.
Yep.
And that's a great thing that you can do with Azure and AWS as well. So you mentioned the personality. And in addition to, so you've got partners that are putting things into the Misti marketplace, but there's also a vibrant developer community that are creating some interesting uses for Misti. And you're talking about the personality. And I remember reading about it was some magicians that are using Misti as a stage assistant.
Yep. What is that?
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah. So, I would say when we design, when we designed Misty, we wanted it to be a robot that would be used in some of those more personalized interactions, like a receptionist or a temperature screener or a companion to an elderly person. You're not going to get that from like a industrial robot arm, right? While the industrial robot arm is good for certain tasks, you don't want it greeting you when you come in your hotel. So, right. So Doug Mckinsey is a magician that, he works with like the biggest names in magic and does shows all over the world. But he leverages technology in a lot of his magic. It's incredible. Like, I don't know how the hell he does this stuff. Like, I was at one time when I met with him, he's like, let me grab 2 random people out of this group, which is like myself and one of our coworkers was there. And he's like, all right, put your phone like in one hand, and so we each had our phones in one of our hands, and he's like, all right, touch your fingers together. As soon as we like touched our, then of course there's like, some theatrics around it all, but touched our fingers together, and like our phones started like dialing each other. Like, it showed up on my caller ID that she was calling me and I was calling her. Just like crazy stuff like that. So dude, he has like these tricks where he'll, where like Misty will be part of the theatrics, and like you'll, roll some dice and hold them in your hand or in a cup. And then Misty will say, hey, you have like a 3 and a 6 on your dice, and you'll look in your hand and it was a 3 and a 6. So that's really playing into the personality and sort of the style of his magic around using technology. And I have no idea how he does like all that stuff.
I love it. And he probably feels the same way about building robots.
Yep. Yeah. So we made it easy for him to, as like, because he's used technology, he's not a computer scientist, but he's sort of kind of a copy and paste coder. But he could actually create a lot of these interactions himself, which is really cool.
Yeah, it looks really fun. And so talking about IoT really comes down to inputs and outputs out in the real world. And Misty's extensible. So there's a helmet, a backpack, this chariot that you guys have now that makes Misty like 4 feet tall.
Yeah.
And this allows other developers to add on physical sensors and additional capabilities to Misty. And one of them was this guy, Scott Hakeem. And we were talking about the fires here in California and in Colorado. And he's built an air quality monitor. Are you familiar with his story?
No, I'm not actually.
So apparently he's using Misty to take air quality measurements throughout the day, where Misty is using a map to go inside and outside and then around the house to figure out where the air quality is the best, and then keeping running logs of it.
That's awesome.
And it's just those emerging things where somebody has a platform and a tool, and it can be, as you said, because it's open, it can be built upon by the community. So you mentioned very early on Rosie the robot from the Jetsons. What do you think would be the natural steps that robotics has to take before we get there? And I can wake up in the morning and say, Misty, I want some ribs tonight. Get to work.
Yeah. A lot of it just has to do with just the progression of technology, right? If you look back to the first iPhone apps, it wasn't sophisticated things, right? One of our developers at Sphero was the guy that wrote the iFart app. Right. And remember like the lighter, like the lighter app, basically just put like a candle or a lighter on your phone. Like that was the
accelerometer lightsaber. Right.
Exactly. And those things got like millions of views. Like that's how it started. And if you think today, it's like, okay, this is like, so simple. But that was like, those were the apps of the initial app store. So we're sort of in that same phase now with Misty and robotics, where we're starting to find applications, those sort of novel things that robots can be used for, that are on the simpler side. And as people become more familiar with the platform, as technology progresses, our sensors get better, so we can do more accurate computer vision and make it cheaper and faster, better mapping and navigation, things like that, more sophisticated skills become available. I mean, just getting a robot like Misti with 2 tracks to drive around your house without getting stuck is incredibly, incredibly difficult.
Yes.
And the things like Boston Dynamics does with their, that a lot of us have seen their videos online with humanoid robots like Atlas doing backflips. I mean, those are like hundreds of people, the best in the world at control systems, and, $1 million robot, plus I'm sure, tens of millions of dollars to get there. And, 1 out of 8 times it doesn't do the backflip, right? It's so if you try to get something in the home, it's got to be reliable. So I guess what I'm saying is, we have to start with some of these applications like, and we're seeing emerging from our customers, education, elder care, receptionists. So, I mean, we're really excited, for instance, that we're getting Misti into all these businesses as this temperature and health screener, which is a very useful application now. And I hope it's not the application that's going to be around forever. Like, hopefully this will go away at some point, right? But these people are going to start to have all these robots. Customers are going to come into maybe a healthcare facility and use Misti and start to think about, wait a minute, that robot just took my temperature and it asked me these questions, but what if it could, what if it could do exactly like you said? Like, wait, what if this could like take me, be a receptionist, and when people walk in, they can ask it, where the restroom is. Like, they can say, hey, I'm here to see Ian. They're like, okay, I looked at the calendar, like, you must be, Mark. I've just notified Ian. He'll be right out. Like, start to think about those other applications that you can build off of, and make more sophisticated things. So I think we're at the beginning of this path. And as just time goes on, people, again, get more familiar with the platform, technology gets better, we'll eventually be able to build more sophisticated hardware. The robot needs to be, if it's going to make your food, it's got to be 6 feet tall and be able to like interact with your stove and your cabinets and stuff probably. So, that's coming down the road, but we're on an important first step in that process.
And look, sounds like you're on a good path. When you mentioned that about having robots that wander around the house autonomously, I've got a couple of Arduino robots that I've built, and they're meant to be obstacle avoiders, but what the true purpose is to find innovative places to get stuck. And with Boston Robotics, with the 1 in 8 on the backflip. And I think where it becomes really important is having platforms that become available to people where they can start to tinker. And it's like back in 1980 when PCs or home computers started to come around with the Timex and the TI, and suddenly it was in people's houses and they could find these solutions. And I think Misti may be the inception point of where robotics goes, because it's now accessible. It's not a toy, and Sphero is great fun, but at its heart, I can't look at Sphero as anything but a toy. But when I look at Misti, I see opportunity and the ability to teach and develop new processes that's not limited to Boston Dynamics, that it's in my home and I can do something with it.
Yeah, it's accessible by a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
And kind of democratizing that development.
That was the word I was looking for, democratized. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Ian, this is great. I've had a great time in this conversation. Where can people go to get a Misti or to find out more about what people are doing with it?
Yeah. So, I mean, probably just our website is probably the easiest place. It's mistyrobotics.com. That's kind of just the hub. You can look at our forums, see what people are building, look at our solutions hub. You can link off to our temperature solution if you have a business that, would benefit from a robot and not a person taking temperature and asking these health screening questions during COVID. Definitely check it out.
Yeah, and I strongly encourage anybody to go to the use cases section and look at what the customer heroes are doing, what's being done in libraries and children's hospitals. These are some really inspiring stories and really gave me a view of what the future of robotics and Misti will be. Ian, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks,
and
Ian.
have a great day.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Holy smokes, here comes some really bad tech jokes.
You know, I don't know if I really have a joke though, but you know, it's interesting. We have, you know, what's nice about being in the companies that we've had. We have a number of people have been here for a while. You see them, you know, kind of go through their phases of hanging out, being single, dating, getting married, and then people having babies, and then those babies go to school. And it just always kind of warming to kind of think what, you know, how they kind of go through that in their lives. And it's really meaningful. And they come up with all kinds of different names for their kids, which is also kind of a fun thing, which actually kind of made me think of something like, you know, what do you think, what is a baby computer? What would a baby computer call their father?
What's that?
Data.
Oh.
Data. Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I meant to mention it in the news, but did you hear that the guy who invented predictive text died last week?
No.
Yeah, his fun fair is next monkey. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for another episode of the Clearly Cloud podcast. Next week, we have the creator of Black Rock City VR talking about how, in response to the COVID epidemic, they were able to take the Burning Man festival and do it in virtual reality online. Should be a good one.
Does that mean that they actually put dirt on you too?
I think if you're a burner, if you've been to enough like Burning Man, you have enough playa dust in your boxes that just one outfit's gonna get it. Playa dust does not go away.
Shouldn't it be called like Burning Person by now?
Well, that is a question you are free to ask next week.
Yes.
All right. Have a great week, everybody.
Somewhere